Hi, everybody. This is Arthi from Human Chapters. I'll tell you a little bit about human chapters. Humans are living narratives with a past, present, and future. These narratives constitute of a number of chapters across a lifespan. The aim of these conversations is to highlight a chapter of the narrative and unpack its connections to other chapters. I don't care whether people are natural storytellers, but I truly do believe each one of us has a worthy story to share. In acknowledgement to country, we acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands in which we meet. We pay respect to their tribal elders, past and present and emerging. We celebrate their continuing culture and we acknowledge the memories of their ancestors. Today, we are going to be speaking with Leslie, and we're going to delve into Leslie's writing journey as part of education. Welcome, Leslie. Tell us a bit
Good
about
morning.
yourself.
Sure. Right now, I am someone who loves hiking, walking, being outdoors, spending time with family and friends. And I just got back from a wonderful, rejuvenating conference. So I'm very excited to be speaking with you about education.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Leslie. Let's delve into your journey. Tell us what part of education you will be talking to us about and what sparked your interest in that area.
Sure. So I'm a lifelong educator. I just fell into this. I found my calling. I was incredibly lucky that I found it at such a young age and never looked back and have been in flow, for 35 years of doing this work. Um, I have always been obsessed with the teaching of writing. I've always loved it, but there was a definite moment of like, crossing a threshold about 20 years ago when I found some very powerful evidence based practices for teaching writing and began using them with my students and seeing a massive change in how they felt about writing and how quickly they could become capable writers.
Mm. Leslie, let's go back 20 years ago when you had a few light bulb moments or that crossing over into more of an evidence-based into writing. Was there a particular, I don't know, semester or something that happened that led you to rethink writing? What started it off?
Sure. Sometimes we think that an event just happened, but you don't realize how there were stepping stones building up to it that we didn't think about or see. So, 20 years ago, I began implementing a very specific approach to teaching writing called SRSD, which we now call Think SRSD because of how we've augmented it.
Mm.
But before that, I was just incredibly lucky. I guess our the stars just play out as they do. And when I was in my early 20s, I was studying at Columbia University Teachers College, and I was in the human development psychology department taking courses with somebody named Dr. Lynn Corno and her colleagues. And she was also in the curriculum and teaching. And she was young at the time. She actually lives down the road from me now, and we go for walks. It's really incredible because I've moved 3 states, and so has she. But she was part of this clique that
Mm.
was looking at self regulated learning. And she was right in the middle of it. She had done her dissertation on self regulated learning. She was obsessed with it and writing about it and studying it. And I think she actually coined the term self regulated learning. And she was going to conferences and publishing. And she opened up a world to me of these research studies in her class where we were reading like these mimeographed, photocopied, printed. She was so amazing that she didn't just hand us a textbook. She was giving us articles that were cutting edge that had just come out in the journals. And so she laid the foundation
Mm.
that guided me as soon as I got into the classroom. My first time children acted out, I said, well, it looks like we have a problem here to talk about and to solve. What are your solutions? What do you suggest?
Mm.
And I just went into the field wanting to empower children and having a philosophy and a way to do that. And so when 20 years ago, 15 years in, I found self-regulated strategy development and the University of Kansas strategy instruction model, it um, jibed with how I thought about instruction and who I was as a teacher. And so I found it very easy to pick it up and give it a shot. But it had really specific steps that I could use with my kids. And I was able to get them self propelling
Yeah.
even more quickly and more efficiently with this approach. And
Mm.
I'll just never forget watching them take off, watching them become independent, watching them go off and use strategies I had taught them in other settings. I
Yeah.
didn't realize people had figured out how to get it to transfer. It was in the steps. And when I did it, it was like baking a cake and it rised.
Oh my goodness. I could totally imagine that scenario playing out and thinking about those steps. But now this is steps in a different format. This is steps once you are implementing that evidence-based instruction. And then the magic unfolds. Well, I say magic, but I don't mean magic in that way that we don't know what happened. Uh,
Mm.
yeah. Can we unpack? So you talked about self-regulated learning. Can we unpack self-regulated learning? And then you said the instruction and who I was as a teacher. I'd love for you to unpack those parts of it, why it resonated with you.
Yes, I'm just lucky that I was shaped
Mhm.
by this amazing educator, Dr. Lynn Corno. I remember in class, she treated us with so much respect. And one day she had to miss class and she just picked this woman in the class who was a little older. She had a little more to just run the class. Like, who does that? She didn't cancel class. The class ran and she just had somebody within us. She had so much respect for us. And it was like she lived and breathed
Mm.
what she was studying and teaching. And she just raised me up to understand and to sort of further this idea of self-regulated learning, that I'm not in charge, I'm putting the kids in charge. And I
Mm.
guess my parents laid a foundation for that because it was who I was.
Mm.
And I just took to it like a fish to water, and it made so much sense. And the minute I got my first class, I wanted to put the kids in charge of their own learning and figure out how to do that.
Mm.
So the self-regulated part, I'll also go a little deeper. I had a background where in my very early days, coming out of college, even before I'd started my ed major,
Mm.
I had done my student teaching in Thailand, and it is a Buddhist country. And the goal of education there is to unfold the divinity within the child.
Mm.
And it's a very different perspective, but it shaped me too. And it was quite fascinating that it was about understanding the spark of the universe that's
Mm.
there within every child and drawing that out. And so that was, your student teaching really impacts you. And so I went into the classroom having had this powerful experience of how do I draw out the best in the child and put the child in charge of unfolding and following their own North Star and divinity within themselves, and charting that. And so that was where I was coming from when I learned this method. And they're sort of the same thing in a lot of ways.
I'm so in love with how you term that, unfolding the divinity within the child. And this could be taken in so many different ways, but thinking through teaching the child explicitly to then almost allow them to find what connects and resonates with them. And it takes me to Marianne Wolf's quote, or when she talks about the passing over in reading, and she talks about when you read something, you go into somebody else's perspective to find your own truth. And that side of reading and writing, yeah, to get to know yourself a little bit more and at a deeper level. So thank you so much, yeah, for that.
I can't say how much I love that you just quoted Marianne Wolf, because part of me is thinking like, yeah, this is a little pie in the sky, although it's very evidence based. Like it was a beautiful way of thinking and being, and
Mm,
coming into an encounter with a child when
mm,
I was 21 in Thailand. But then when I came back here, I discovered the evidence based framework
mm,
for it,
mm,
for the same idea of I respect you, I honor you,
mm,
I'm going to support you in your life's journey and in your finding who you are and following your path.
mm,
And
mm,
yet at the same time, there's it links into the evidence-based world. And Marianne Wolf is one of my sheroes because of how she's got so much depth and
mm,
texture and
mm,
the heavy hitting explicit instruction and all of this self-regulated learning. It's evidence-based, it's been through randomized controlled trials, it's
mm,
explicit, it works, it raises academic outcomes, and at the same time it is overlaying with the most beautiful philosophy.
mm,
Greta
mm.
Hammond comes to mind. She says our goal is to teach children to learn how to learn. And I
Mm,
would say even deeper, to unfold who they are, but to learn how to learn. And the idea that we can explicitly, systematically teach phonics so that they can learn how to learn. And we can be teaching them how to approach learning itself in a way that puts them in charge and enables them to reach their own realizations and absorb knowledge and learning
yeah,
independently without us needing to guide it all.
that's exactly right. And thinking about almost philosophical elements, but then your explicit instruction, evidence-based elements, but then using both of those to raise individual human frequencies when it comes to learning to read and write, and then deepening that for other purposes.
Yes, it's funny how it's two things
Hmm.
that we are equipping them with very basic skills. Let's pull these squiggles off the page and understand what they mean.
Yeah.
And we have systematic, explicit, proven ways to do this. And at the same time, we're teaching them how to think and how to become human. And that is happening in parallel at the exact same time. And we
Hmm.
can be teaching both. In the US, I think it's there in Australia too. There is this tension between whole language balanced literacy, which is um, lacking in the rigor of the evidence-based practices. And there's this, I don't know if you have it as much in Australia, but there is this tendency to split
Hmm.
and create camps
Hmm.
and make things either or rather than both and. This is such a both and Marianne Wolf gets it.
100%. And it just very recently, one of the teachers I work with and I were talking about the care factor in writing. Now, the care factor phrasing is it's quite abstract. And we think about when we're talking or when we're reading or when we're writing, that intentionality we come with. And thinking through what am I going to write, actually taking it at a slower pace, but understanding. And this is where I think about self-regulation is within that care factor. It's hard now, but it's not hard forever. But thinking through it very slowly, or not very slowly, but allowing your brain to process that and care for it with respect and on a almost that hard area or that hard element to soften it and help you learn it is what, yeah. And yeah,
It's
that's
so beautiful.
self-regulation. That's my poetic take on self-regulation and just literally breathing through what's hard to what will be okay.
I can't tell you how much I absolutely love that. You've really got me thinking that that's a new word that I haven't
Mm.
brought into this work, the idea of care. But we do enable children to reach that feeling of care far more easily. And we
Yeah.
do it through cognitive modeling and affective modeling.
Yes.
That is a big piece. When I wrote my dissertation, I can't remember the name of the woman I quoted. We'll put it in the show notes, but um, they become who we are.
Mm.
We teach who we are.
Yes.
And when you set up this climate where I'm going to, use heavy hitting, explicit,
Mm.
systematic instruction, and at the same time, I'm also going to work to move that along to
Mm.
enable you to become self regulated. So
Mm.
it's like handing off.
Yeah.
I'm building your skills toward then enabling you and alongside enabling you. But the idea of caring.
Mm.
So, teach writing, we give skills and
Mm.
strategies, very specific ones, power, tide. And then we use cognitive modeling
Mm.
and we actually groom the children to be able to internalize the strategies, but also the cognitive modeling um, quickly and efficiently. And then we have like a feedback piece, and it's a loop. There are these three things: strategies,
Yes.
mod, and then giving feedback.
Mm.
But the modeling, the care,
Mm.
you're making me think I'm excited to get in front of kids again. We work on two levels
Yeah.
because you have to have the pass off. So
Mhm.
you cognitively model, you affectively model coping. Oh, this is hard. But
Yes.
I really do want to write about, the human rights resolutions and
Mm.
how they play out in war-torn nations. And this is a
Mm.
fifth grade task that our kids write about. But I'm stuck and I just want to go take a break. No, I can do this. I'm going to use my strategies. I'm
Mm.
going to use power and tide. I'm going to carry myself through this. You
Yes.
can use these beautiful strategies, but it's not enough.
Mm.
The beauty of these approaches, the strategies instruction model, Don Deschler, he says you want to fade from over self-guidance to covert.
Mm.
And the way you do this, Karen Harris's work is coming to mind with self-regulated strategy development, is you have a handoff of the cognitive modeling where you have the children write self-statements. And this is core
Mm.
to all of SRSD. They write self-statements. I will keep going even if I'm having a hard time.
Yes.
Um, the one I'm modeling right now is just take one more step. And the meaning is I've dropped my son at a US Air Force Academy, military. He's no
Yeah.
longer civilian, he's now military, and he just went through basic
Mm.
training. And his beautiful leader, the squadron leader, kept saying to them, when you're going through basic, if you feel like you're going to fall down, you want to quit, you want to give up, you say
Mm.
to yourself, one more step. And
Yes.
it's so beautiful. And if the guy next to you is faltering or the woman on the other
Mm.
side, you say out loud, one more step.
Yes.
Carry each other, you carry yourself, one more step. And so when I'm writing, when it gets really hard and I feel stuck, I can say to myself, one more step.
Yeah.
Simone Biles, she went out on the Olympian floor and she said, I've got this, I've got this. She's
Yes.
caught on hot mic saying, I've got this.
Yeah.
So do the pass off
Mm.
of the cognitive and affective model by modeling. I'm going to use power and tide. I'm going to one more step, journey of 1,000 miles, one more step. And then you have them write this down, say it
Mm.
out loud, say it to a peer. At first, it doesn't feel like me, but it becomes
Mm.
more and more authentic as I practice it, as I do it every day, as I internalize it. And that's how we're passing off
Yes.
cognitive and affective modeling by having them write these statements, practice the statements, and use them.
Yeah.
It happens much more quickly than if I'm only modeling it.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting that when I talk about the care factor, you said you're having to think about it and where to put it. Whereas when I was talking to this particular teacher, I talked about your work and I was like, Leslie talks about the self-regulated strategy development, which is the SRSD part. And she talks through we need to be able to be regulated as we're writing, not because it comes easily, but because it is going to be difficult and we're going to have to push through that little bit further. And to me, that is, there are different layers of care in that. One, in that you've got part of it, one, in that you're getting the next part of it, but understanding that they are the progression points and you may it's that dance, it's the back and forth. You will progress and then you'll feel like you've gone back a few steps. But that going back, is it actually going back or is it growth? And you're understanding more about what those skills entail and understanding more about what do you want to write and honoring that space because nobody can see in our brains, but it's the actions that we take that allow people to have a window into what sort of thinking is going on.
Yes. At Think SRSD, we
Yeah.
call it making the invisible visible,
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
you've just described. So, just a quick word on Think SRSD. Um, we are a group that have carried these practices to classrooms at scale. And so we have refined them, we have ironed them out,
Mm-hmm.
and we teacher voiced them, if that can be a verb, because our group is all teachers and we've spent 20 years turning them into tools and strategies and verbiage that you can use all year long in your classroom. And so when you said that, I was thinking about what we say to our kids. We have a couple of Think SRSD phrases, one of which is we make the invisible visible.
Mm-hmm.
And the other big Think SRSD phrase that we came up with, in our teacher voice is we say to the kids, who do you want to be in charge while you're writing?
Mm.
Do you want it to be you or do you want the teacher telling you what to do? Because
Yeah.
I'm fine. I can tell you what to do. Well, invariably, we've never had a hand go up for that. Every hand goes up for, I want to be in charge. And then we say, okay, well, to be in charge, you need a plan.
Mm.
And Artie, what you're making me think is in our plan, we should add something about, and I will find what I care about
Mm.
in this writing assignment and I will put my best care into what I'm writing. I love that so much.
It's yeah. And I think one of the reasons why I think about that particular part, even when it comes to reading, right, any part of academics, that care factor is that we will all have difficulties somewhere. We will all, and that's that learning phase, no matter what. But honoring that space when you're a student, when you're very young, that honoring, you don't consciously know the meaning of honoring. But as you're getting older and you are trying and trying again and taking the deep breaths through it and saying, it's okay, I will try one more time, or I will go a little bit, a fraction further than what I was, those fractions add up and they turn to really good, tangible progress, which almost then turns to trusting yourself. And this is something that I see at schools so frequently is students not trusting themselves enough to understand that they will be able to do it, they will be able to remember, and they will be able to carry themselves through, whether it's a word, whether it's a sentence, whether it doesn't matter what level of reading or writing they are doing or what chunk of it, but trusting themselves, caring for that particular task, and then doing it. And myself included, my content writing was incredibly poor as a child. But what carried me through was the rhythmic cursive. And I was so obsessed with it that I made teachers feel bad for me because my handwriting was so beautiful, but the content really wasn't great. And so they'd go and be like, ah, you can do better, but your handwriting's really beautiful. And so that was my consolation. And that's where I really wanted to write. And I really wanted to say a few things because I loved the use of sophisticated vocabulary. I just didn't have the strong foundations in place to be able to put those thoughts down in an articulated manner.
I have like a million thoughts in response to that. I'm glad that the handwriting came easily because that's often a barrier. But yes, we all want to release and call forth what is most beautiful in our children and teach them to do that with others when they're interacting and to have that care. What I love about this approach is how tangible it is in how it helps teachers reach the outcome that you're describing, where children do care, where we sort of release a momentum. And I'm having a couple of thoughts. Like, again, at Think SRSD, we are very teacher voice, very feet on the ground, very practical. And one of the things that we've learned is when the kids are writing, they have to drown out distractions in order to get to that point where they can think more deeply. And they need strategies and inspiration to get to that point where they can think more deeply. They need to see exemplars written by peers. They need to have structure to get themselves going with using the writing process. We call that power: plan, organize, write, edit, revise. Then they need a structure to structure their paragraph. We call that TIDE. We call it TIDEL because TIDEL includes an L, which is for the language box. And so we're structuring, like, I'm thinking of you sitting in a classroom with this beautiful handwriting and all kinds of things you want to say. And how do I say that through my writing? So we've given them power. We've given them TIDEL with the L at the end for the language box. We've given them these tools at Think SRSD that they can use. But then we also get equally talk level so that they can drown out anything that's interfering with them being able to come up with their beautiful ideas and express them. And I'm thinking about my own son. So I used to run writing club in the summers. And I still do. I find the children of my friends and I pull them together, and because I can't stop teaching because that's who I am and what I do. But I had taught my kids that you can tell yourself to stay focused. Well, focus means nothing to a child. They don't know what that means, and it does not guide them. So we switched it and we got really fine-grained about the self-talk. Okay, what do we do when we're focused? We keep our eyes on the paper. That worked. So they would write at the top of their paper, keep eyes on paper. Don't look at time, keep eyes on. I was like, don't put a don't, just put what you will do. Okay, keep eyes on paper. And if there's noise around me, drown it out by saying, I've got this, I've got this. So they were using these tactics. And a funny story, somebody was delivering a dryer through our living room during writing club, and all the kids, come on, he had big boots and a big box. It's so interesting, so much more fun than writing. Well, my little guy just kept writing. And at the end of class, I asked him, how'd you stay on task? And he said, eyes on paper. And I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. And it worked. It actually worked. And these little things that are evidence-based, like teaching children to go from covert or from overt self-talk where I'm modeling, where they're saying it, to covert where they're actually reaching what my son did, that whole trajectory can be taught explicitly, along with power and tide, along with having feedback systems where we give them feedback. They learn to give themselves feedback and peer feedback. When you put all of that into place, you get a momentum, which then releases so that they can let more of that beauty within themselves out. And it still works. I used this year with a group of first and second graders. And now I'm so quick at it. Within a couple of classes, yes, I was trying to model something and they were furiously writing away. And I said, "What are you doing?" And they held up and they had filled an entire page with an essay. And these were kids who at their pre could only put a sentence. Now it was a
wow,
beautiful script, it was beautiful, but now they could fill an entire page because they'd got the strategies and we'd created a climate.
Yes.
So it's two things. It's all the little specific pieces and it's the goal of creating that climate.
Absolutely. Leslie, I'd love to go into two very specific examples, one being an expository writing and the other being a narrative. But thinking through or sort of also tapping into the space of elements of Think SRSD and then thinking through their own knowledge that they're coming with and marrying that knowledge, which is a web of information, into this structure that's created that is understandable to their communication partner or whoever is reading that piece of writing.
Sure. Happy to do that. Two examples come to mind right away. So I brought up the human rights topic that in fifth grade is a popular one in this country. And I had taught at the United Nations International School for most of my career. So the UN is, I don't have words for it. It's so near and so dear and so beautiful, that the promise of that organization. And so we have this assignment where children look through the UN list of human rights and then they apply it to a current event. And our students were writing about Syria and the Syrian refugees. And they were using these strategies to learn and to apply this beautiful document to what was happening there. And they were using all of our strategies, power. I'm going to pick my ideas. I'm going to read the text. We had a little video. We discuss it. Discussion is absolutely huge in Think SRSD. It's woven all through every day. And take notes. And I'm going to go through the process of power and then write and then edit and revise. And I'm going to use tide to structure my paragraph. I'm going to start off by saying, I'm going to tell you about the UN Commission for Human Rights and how these are playing out or not playing out in the war that's happening in Syria right now. That's my T. My I are my facts, my important evidence from the text. So there you're pulling from the articles we read about Syria and you're pulling from the human rights documents. D is detailed analysis that comes from my head. And that's a Think SRSD thing. Again, where we've broken this all down and shown teachers through teacher voice how to really teach this to kids. We say the I comes from the book and detailed examination comes from my head and my heart. That's where I'm bringing the meaning to what, and I'm showing my deep understanding of it. And then the E is the ending. So this child was writing, and in expository writing, we don't often use the word I. Same with persuasive. We call it opinion. Opinion has a little bit more vigor. Opinion implies I'm writing about substance that I've read. Whereas persuasive is more rhetorical. I'm trying to convince you of something. So expository writing, we do as much opinion writing as expository, where we see them as combined and we do them left and right together. And I think that this girl was writing an opinion piece about what was happening there and how well these principles were being applied. So she's using tide,
Mm-hmm.
she's injecting her opinion, but we're not using the word I. So
Mm-hmm.
she got to the first D and she's talking about, and she's visibly moved, talk about care.
Yes.
Her eyes welled up. And she said, these children will never see their grandparents again. And then
Mm.
she got emotional as she's writing.
So your students' eyes welled up.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So my student's eyes welled up. It was kind of a cliffhanger there. And we spoke to her, and it turned out that she was having this connection to
Mm.
the kids, which is what you always hope will happen, that the kids will be connected to the material. And she said, I have to move to Texas and I'm not going to get to see my grandmother every day. And I absolutely love seeing her every day. And then she said, but these kids, and that's when she's welling up, they may never get to see their grandparents again. They're refugees. They're going to another country. They're going to be moving to a whole other, and they may never see them again. And so she was having that connection. And so, we teach them, there's never any rules. You can use I, but
Mm.
we encourage them to avoid using I when they're doing expository writing. But of course, for punch, for reason, and sometimes for the style of a child, it comes in. But for her detailed examination, she was able to write, just think about it. These children will never get to see their extended family, people who may mean everything to them. And that is why human rights and this clause of we will not divide up family, she was pulling in the human rights
Mm.
principles,
Yes.
and as she was writing about them and analyzing them. And so that's expository writing. Again, we toggle between expository writing and opinion writing all year long.
Mm.
From the beginning of the year to the end, we have kids do a mix of both. And that's really critical,
Yeah.
that they see that they can use their words
Mm.
to accomplish something, to have
Mm.
power. Um, we also think it's really important for equity
Mm.
that they be writing in response to rich, complex text
Mm.
using, tier 2 domain specific words, but just rich words. How are we going to get them there if they're writing about my favorite pet?
Mm.
Um, they need to be analyzing a rich, meaty text source,
Mm.
pulling it apart, pulling out the words, putting them into a language box,
Mm.
noticing the syntax as they're reading, underlining a favorite sentence,
Mm.
mimicking that when they go to write, and pulling out the conceptual facts that they care about as they read. Now, is there a place for personal narrative? Yes. In the beginning of the year, we have our kids do a personal narrative piece because I want to get to know them. And
Mm.
in the spring, we play with it a bit more. Is there a place for persuasive writing? Should there be webcams in the classroom? Favorite pet? Sure. It's a fun sort of art writing. But the bulk of the writing over the year, our writing units need to be writing in response to rich, complex text about topics I care about, but it's an equity issue. It's because then the kids are absorbing
Mm.
that language. Reading is breathing in, writing is breathing out.
Mm.
And to get that system functioning where we're then lifting the academic language. At the conference I was just at, we were calling it book language.
Yes.
We're lifting that academic language through having the children read, dissect, care about, love, pull apart, mine a rich, complex text, and then use all of that when they then go to write. So that's an expository example.
That is incredible. And I've just written down a few things. So you said, so power is your planning acronym, which is plan, organize, write, edit, revise. Actually, it's the whole thing. You use it as you're going along.
Yes.
Tide is topic, information, detailed analysis, ending. And then
Yeah.
tide L is for language. So that's your paragraphing structure. And then you talked about cognitive modeling. So going through from overt to covert, which is your self statements and self statements. First, you're writing it off, and then you are internalizing them and using them deliberately in the action of writing to help you
Yes.
keep focused. And feedback loop. Have I missed out on any elements?
You've got it. It's beautiful. To make it really easy for teachers.
Yes.
So we've won multiple large federal grants to
Mm,
scale this approach. So my connection with this approach goes way back. As I
yeah.
shared, I studied with Lynn Corno. I was reading Karen Harris. I was reading
Mm,
University of Kansas back in the early 90s. And then I found this and began using it as a classroom
mm,
teacher. And right away, I began publishing on it, empirical research studies in peer-reviewed journals. So I
mm,
was winning grants, writing grants to help with getting independent scoring
yeah.
and publishing on all of this. And
Yes.
so I have this 20-year history with it. But about a decade ago, maybe a little less, we began winning large federal grants,
Mm,
how to implementation science this, how to actually carry it to the classroom at scale, because
mm,
we could figure it out, but it was clunky. It took a lot of time and work to try to figure out how to take what was in a method section or a book, make it come alive in our classroom.
mm,
So we won these grants to study this approach, and with very tight, I am a researcher, I have
mm.
my doctorate, very tight adherence to fit and fidelity to make sure we don't lose any power.
Yes.
So, yes, we have power, as you shared, is the
Mm,
overarching, and that comes from Karen Harris uses POW, but Carol Sue Engler, who was part of that Lynn Corno clique,
yes.
she used power, and she also has strong effect sizes. So we adopted power because you really need that edit and revise
Mm,
piece. And then we adapted Tide. So Tide, actually, I made up TDC in 2012, topic,
mm,
details, conclusion.
yeah.
And then I saw Linda Mason had made up or was using Tide. I was like, oh, that's easier to remember than TDC. So we switched to Tide. That's not an SRSD thing. That was a Linda Mason thing. And it was something I had actually made up as well. And then the SRSD researchers began to pick it up and study it.
Mm,
But we augmented it with an L
yeah.
because you can't sit still in the field of education. We have to always be looking for the most effective ways to
Yeah.
teach our kids. And we added this L because Dr. Adria Truckenmiller has been studying lifting up the hood to see why do approaches like
Yeah.
SRSD or SRSD, why do they work? So
Yes.
she's been looking at all the components, breaking it down and correlating those to overall outcomes.
Mm,
And she found that vocabulary is the front runner
mhm,
in an essay. Vocabulary is the strongest predictor of
mhm,
overall writing quality. Next is text structure,
mhm,
Tide.
mhm.
And so we augmented Tide to add an L because her research was saying you need both.
Yeah.
So that was the rationale behind why we've augmented it. And again, that's, I think, SRSD creative shift. And then just to finish up on expository,
Mhm.
we also have children create sentence expansions, variations. They work on syntax every day for 5 to 10 minutes
Mhm.
to kind of prime the pump, get the kids going.
Yes.
Um, we use Charles Haynes's framework, but it's really evidence-based
Yeah.
because what he's doing, Charles Haynes from Talking to Writing with expanding sentences,
Mhm.
is listed as an evidence-based practice in the What Works Clearinghouse
Mhm.
IES guide for teaching writing.
Yeah.
And that guide is considered an evidence-based practice according to
Mhm.
the federal government's definition of what is evidence-based. So
Mhm.
we only augment in ways that are evidence-based, but we do it based on being in the classroom and kids saying, do I have to advise and do I have to revise and edit? Well, if
Mhm.
you're using power and we say, do you think you should do all the steps in power? That was why we made that augmentation and the Tide adding the L and then
Mhm.
the syntax. Um, those pieces are part of what we were talking about, kind of the it's almost like a paradox earlier
Mm.
of the explicit structured instruction hand in hand with the deeper releasing of who they are. It's
Yes.
like open a doorway and help the kids release. And that child was so free
Yeah.
because she had all these structures and skills in place that
Mm.
she could have that deep connection to the writing and get to where she was and
Yeah.
analyzing it.
That's incredible. I'd love to go unpack, if we can, Charles Haynes's framework for
Oh, sure.
syntax. That would be wonderful because I have heard you talk about it before, but I'd love
Yes.
for our listeners to think about it too.
Sure,
Mhm.
sure. So I had been trained in a grammar technique. I can't remember what it is now. I don't remember the first name of it. But anyway, I had learned all kinds of grammar techniques.
Mm.
I had been trained in writing revolution years back. Really appreciate the advances that they've made around writing to text
Yeah.
that jives with what, we're doing at Think SRSD. But just using connectors to
Mm.
expand sentences or inserting in a positive, I wasn't seeing my children's overall writing quality grow. It's a tool in my toolkit, but
Mm.
I needed. And so I went searching and I heard Dr. Charles Haynes speak a couple of times. And I thought, this is it. This is a man who it's in his blood and bones and being. He's 45 years in.
Mm.
He's a teacher at heart. He spent 20 years at the classroom level at this incredible school outside of Boston. And then he spent 20 years running multi-million grants, but with a teacher's heart.
Mm.
And his book, From Talking to Writing, is very powerful in filling in all the blocks.
Yeah.
There's no assumption driven teaching. We don't assume that just because kids do have an innate grammar learning mechanism,
Mm.
that then equips them to pick up academic language and use it effortlessly.
Mm.
Yes, we do as children. We're programmed to learn spoken grammar,
Mm.
but learning book grammar or academic language is something different, and it benefits from explicit instruction.
Mhm.
And so in his book, he has a step-by-step starter kit, that's so comprehensive. I'd never seen anything like it. It begins at the word level,
Mhm.
where we're picking strong vocabulary, because the root, as Adria Truckenmiller found, the root of all beautiful writing is the words we choose. So he starts there. Nobody else had started there. So I was fascinated. And then he has this, comes from Dorothy Tyack, who he studied with in California 40 years ago. She had looked at how spoken language emerges in children, and she modeled her writing instruction, or he modeled the writing
Mhm.
instruction after how spoken language is evolving. So
Mhm.
you start with NVO, noun, verb, object, in the English language. And then he systematically builds, expands, varies, and then he gets into coherence, which other models I haven't seen do. How do we link from one idea to the next?
Mm.
And he rocked my world and made me understand the parts of language in a way I never had before. So we've integrated in pieces, but we always tell our teachers you have to buy his book to understand
Mhm.
the approach as well. But what he's doing, again, is evidence based,
Mm.
because the method is described in this What Works Clearinghouse
Mm.
IES guide on how to teach writing, which, again, as I said earlier, by being included in that, it makes it an evidence-based practice. So his work is absolutely inspired, unique, and incredible.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to unpack Charles Haynes's work. It just makes you appreciate that transition between spoken language to book language, but to be able to again be constructed but deconstructed as well, to go back into spoken language because being completely academic or using complete academic language can also lose its coherence and message. So that idea of understanding wonderful written pieces of text, sure they can be made up of complex sentences, but having a variation of simple and compound and complex and compound complex, and depending on the message you intend to take to your audience, but you want them to understand it well too.
And you're going to love this as a language person. Charles Haynes always says, we don't talk about language, we do language.
Mm, mm,
And so his work is just repeated exercises of expanding and then varying and then
yeah.
coherent. The kids are doing language.
Mm,
So it just becomes who they are and what they do. So when they're writing, they're not consciously thinking, I'm now going to use a complex. They don't even know that verbiage. I don't even think
mm,
we need to teach that verbiage. We
yes.
use kid-friendly language to do it, and it's systematic and fluid.
Mm,
And it leads to this beautiful, we might have them check it over to make sure that I'm using varied sentence
mm,
structures because,
mm.
longer isn't always better.
Yeah.
Adria Truckenmiller's research fascinatingly found that more complex sentences were not correlating to higher writing quality.
No,
So
no.
it's really the variation and the intentionality in
Yeah.
how we're using them. Like a short sentence can have punch, and
Ab-
the kids,
and it's so interesting to think about that. So, as somebody that learned English as a formal language and having to go through grammatical units, my perception was that even as a child, I'd think about language in a way to go, what sort of a word did they say and why did they use that word in the sentence structure? What deeper meaning? Like they were all very interesting questions to me. But then what happened was as a result of those questions, then it I think resulted to somewhat of an overgeneralization or a perception of complex is better. But in that world of complexity comes the component of confusion as well. And it has taken so long. Like even today, I've just finished a master's university course. And as I was writing assignments to go through, I'm making it complex, but even as I am reading it out loud, I'm actually getting confused with what I'm trying to address as part of this assignment. And then thinking through, or even that acceptance of actually, if I do strip it down, if I do make it a little bit simpler and make it sound more like me, then that's fantastic because the person reading it will understand it and I can add depth that way. But it was fascinating thinking through or shifting the perception of being complex is better to then stripping it down. But stripping it down doesn't mean you don't know, but actually having an acceptance of that. I'm not sure if I make a great deal of
so you're
sense.
making so much sense. I actually heard Louisa Moats say recently, when she edits, she does more uncombining than combining.
Yeah.
That you want to make your message simple enough
Mm,
that people can digest the message and not get tangled in the writing. And this is something that we do talk about with our kids. We talk a lot about TAP,
yeah.
topic, audience, purpose.
Yes.
And who's your audience? Who's reading your writing? And
Mm,
do you want to touch their heart and move them and
mm,
build an understanding in your
yeah.
reader? Then think about how you're weaving your which vocabulary you're picking, how you're explaining you can use synonyms next to a vocabulary word to make sure your reader will get it. But yes, uncombining your sentences. And we teach that to our kids, how to read it over. Peer feedback is central. We do it every single week.
Mm,
We have a week where we have teach at the beginning of the week, teach a new strategy, learn a new
mm,
text, model for bulk of the week. And then at the end of the week, we have feedback Friday.
yeah.
And that is that cycle, the power cycle of teach. It's reading heavy at the beginning of the
Mm,
week and then writing heavy at the end of the week,
yeah.
breathing in, breathing out every week.
Yeah.
But at the end of the week, when we have them score, they
Mm,
self score, but then they peer score. And
yes.
then we put peer writing up on the board and we score the peer writing.
Yeah.
And that's when they talk about, as we're doing the peer scoring TAP,
Yeah.
topic, author, audience, and purpose.
Yeah.
And that is when we might do some uncombining, because
Mm.
just as you're saying, you've over complexified it. We
Yeah.
want it to be accessible to our readers.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. It's fun when we figure things out as adults
Yes.
and better teach it to our kids.
Exactly. And just, yeah, every time writing these things, oh, it makes sense in my brain, but somebody else reading it goes, no, no,
Yes.
no. What are you talking about?
Right,
It's clear. It's
right.
clear. It's not. It's as clear as mud.
And you want to go deeper with that. When we're reading our students' writing, we bring who we are to
Yeah.
what we are reading. So each one of your readers, Archie, is going to bring who they are. So no matter how clear we make it, what sense they're going to make of it is their whole human journey toward who they are at the moment in terms of interpreting the words that we've put on paper. That starts to get really kind of ephemeral and
Yes, indeed it does. Leslie, I wondered if we could take a moment to unpack how this works for students with language difficulties. It could be developmental language disorder or a language disorder associated with um, any other conditions that are there. So that's
yes.
one part of my question. And the second part is for for people that might want to attempt this approach, but possibly not at a tier one level, more at an intervention level. How does that work?
Oh, I love that question. Yes, and you had also asked about narrative. Should I wrap up
Oh,
just the
yes, please. Yes.
super quickly?
Yeah.
Sure. So the narrative strategy that we use is called C-space.
Mm.
And the acronym for C-space is characters, setting,
Yeah.
and then something that we made up is problem purpose,
Oh, yeah.
because the P is often seen as problem, but as you get into the upper grades, it becomes a little bit more complicated. It becomes the conflict.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's why we have problem purpose. And
Yeah.
then the A is action, usually three.
Yeah.
The C is conclusion, and the E is emotion. And you had asked how we bring our kids into this. So we were modeling C-space for a group of kids that I was working with this year. And we were actually supposed to do a tied lesson, but they were checked out. It was June, and
Mm.
one talking about, she was a little anxious. After class, I'm going dirt bike riding with her dad. Well, her dad is like a professional dirt bike rider. So he's like, let's go. He has some word for turbocharge, like we're doing this.
Mm.
She's only 7. But it was good, high expectations. And so we changed the lesson. We were going to be writing about, I forget what the topic was. Oh, these characters we'd read about, a penguin and a puppy. And instead, we switched the lesson because it was June. It was really hard to remember. And these 4 characters were now going to go on a dirt bike ride. And so the way that we teach narrative is we give the structure. They wrote it down. They had C-space written, and we were structuring our story. But these 4 characters were now going dirt bike riding. So what were the dirt bike riding? So what were the problems they were going to face? What were the actions? And we modeled, and they were giving their ideas, and they were like jumping. We were doing this through Zoom. They were jumping through the screen to give us all of their ideas as we were modeling in front of them. They had so much fun. And then when it came time for them to write their story, they were just unstoppable. They
Yeah.
wrote space down the side, and then they came up with topics that were related to what we'd read, pulling on, but also touching their passion. So I just wanted to let them
Wow.
know.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in terms of how this works for students with learning disabilities, okay, this is again where Think SRSD, we're bringing in our teacher education background
Mm.
and our, teacher ed. So the first thing is we're asset based.
Mm.
And we look for what are the strengths in the students that we're teaching. So when we collect their pre-assessment, which again is something unique to Think SRSD, that we start with a pre-assessment for this for a couple of reasons, but so that we can see their assets and their strengths, and so that they can set their goals.
Mm.
And so we collect this we look at, what did you do that's so fantastic already? And now what are your goals? So immediately we're launching that self-regulation by focusing on we collected this for you so that you can use it to set your goals. And then this approach gives so much access, so many access points. Somebody recently said to me, if you're not using this, you're pouring kerosene on ADHD. If you're not giving kids the structures and the skill support and the direct instruction, it's kerosene. And your kids blow up. And of course, you see all the behavior problems that we don't see. The biggest thing we hear from teachers is there are no behavior problems now, which is like, it just makes me want to get this out to every teacher and every child in the universe, because no child should be getting in trouble and not knowing what to do and acting out as a coping mechanism when we have the instruction that can help them. For kids with developmental language disorders, we use, well, a lot of all the structured instruction imagery. We show videos, we use pictures as we're reading. And we try to keep everything as close to grade level as we can, because developmentally, even if my skills are behind, my heart and my cognitive interests are at grade level. So we try to get them up. We scaffold, we read aloud, we choral read, but we try to get them into the language and the concepts that are as close. We give them, we do not bring down the text complexity, because if we're going to teach them book language, they need to see book language, but we do bring down the volume. So instead of reading the Iliad, or what was one, Beowulf, we were working on Beowulf recently with some teenagers. And instead of giving the whole poem, we gave 4 stanzas. And then that was what we worked on. And we just did each sentence. We had to like pull apart and get the meaning of each sentence. But they were getting into Beowulf, and they were actually getting the joy and enjoying this crazy poem. So we bring down the volume, but we do not bring down the complexity, because we've got to get them to that complexity. And then we just have all kinds of extra little tips, like we color code the writing, then we color code the organizer. Some other things that we do for these kids. I had one idea. It'll come back. But just structuring, giving all of that executive functioning support and additional executive functioning supports, stems, frames, giving them what they need in order to get their ideas down on the page.
Thank you so much, Leslie. That's been incredible to delve into so many different elements of Think SRSD, but also thinking about those philosophical elements at the beginning and thinking through the complexity of writing, because it is one of the most complex parts of literacy to learn. And if anything, it's an ongoing learning that we, sort of delve into for decades and decades.
Unconstrained, right? It's unconstrained. It's
Yes.
never. I think that's part of the joy. The sub skills, the transcription skills, those are constrained. We get mastery on those.
Yes.
But the thinking that we're releasing from the child and supporting them on their life's journey, on their human journey, and using writing as a vehicle for them to carry themselves along and make sense of their journey as it's unfolding.
Absolutely. As we do wrap up, has there been anything that I haven't thought to ask, or something that you've been wanting to share that I haven't provided the opportunity for?
I don't know why, but I was just thinking as I was getting ready for this interview and speaking to you, and then having come from this incredible conference, Big Sky in Montana, I highly recommend it, or I think they'll be selling the sessions. They were fantastic. I've just been thinking about my life's purpose. And as I was there, I had this conversation with somebody else who's also 35. Like, what are we leaving to the next generation of teachers? Like, I'm not done. I've still got 20, 30 years left, but I'm 35 years in. What are we leaving? And we're still at 35% of our nation is reading proficiently. It's not okay. 24% of our nation is writing proficiently. And I was thinking about this interview, I was thinking about the equity of it all and how incredibly important it is for listeners to look up what works. And Think SRSD has decades of research behind it. It is built on dozens of randomized control trial studies at the core of what we do.
Yeah.
We only bring in practices that are evidence-based. And there are other writing approaches, and our bookshelf will always be growing. It's unconstrained as well. We'll always be learners. But when we go and meet with our children, we need to be bringing them what has been proven to work.
Yes.
So even if there's, a study, we want something with the most studies, but we want to be bringing our children something that is stamped evidence-based, because everybody is putting that on every box now. You need to ask, where are the studies? Where is research that is forming the foundation? And it can't be a 20-page catch-all. I've seen those people who find something where everything, there has to be a concise, clear, this itself has been put through research studies, and we are using it with fit and fidelity. So there can be little tweaks to it, like we've done at Think SRSD with close adherence to fit and fidelity. But we need to be using what works with our kids. They're so precious. Their stories are so precious. Why would you not bring them what works and then have them acting out and missing beauty? So I would just say, please dive into the research world. I know it's messy. I know it's hard. I know it takes years to begin to make sense of these studies, but do the hard work because our kids deserve it from us.
Absolutely. There is a beautiful website for developmental language disorder, and it's engagewithdld.com. But if you Google search it, they have such a wonderful way of distilling research studies into single summary pages, but they have the most important information. And I looked at that website and thought about, I hope more people do this with research that is so relevant and distill it into summaries that can be easily read and understood. But then with that summary it goes along with the research paper to deepen your understanding and thinking through. Research is messy, but it's very important to understand because that's what we can implement. And we can understand something at a simple level first, just like students do, and then build on that understanding. So,
And I hope that those distillations of the research also have a resource. Something that was coming up at this conference is it's not enough to have the theory. We need a practical tool.
yes.
So, for example, Nellie out of the
Yes.
UK, which you would love, NELI is a resource
Yes.
that can translate all that theory in a practical way to your classroom. And back to what you were saying earlier, simpler is better. One thing we've had to do with SRSD is that it's the whole kitchen sink. And I've been like, oh, but you're not thinking about this piece. Like, if it's so over complexified that am not going to be wrapping my head around the entire thing at every minute, how do you expect regular teachers? So back to what we were saying earlier, like, you're so outside yourself and other centered that you were thinking about your reader and will my reader understand this? We need to think about the teachers and Occam's razor, simplest solution is usually the best. Sometimes there are just 6 steps. You follow them in your classroom. I'm reaching back to University of Kansas. They have beautiful resources. 6 steps. Karen Harris picked them up. sort of tweak them and use them in her approach. But there's this very simple way of teaching.
Mm.
It's all free at the Think SRSD website, and we've simplified it, and we're seeing the gains. So I would say learn the research and then find a resource that is evidence-based, that's simple, that I can use to bring this into my classroom, and then just get started. But the resource piece is important. And Think SRSD is one of them. There are others that are equally powerful, like
Mm.
Nellie out of the UK for younger grades. But Think SRSD really is a resource. And so many people get started with it for free. They join our Facebook group,
Yes.
they go to our website.
Yeah. And I'm going to put all of your details, Leslie, into the show notes, your website, the Facebook group, anything else that you give me as part of the show notes bank. But thank you so very much for taking the time, energy, and effort into this very, very meaty conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I hope you have as well. Yeah, every one of these conversations
Really
is like a book,
looking
a
forward to
CD.
reconnecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and for our listeners, Human Chapters will be available on the YouTube channel, on podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. And of course, please share it with people that may connect with it, and that may want to try out Think SRSD. Thank you.
Thank you very much.